Good morning, Wareham. It is Friday, May 31st. We have a great show here for you. The news headlines, the weather report, and today in history. Chloe Shufford, an editor at Wareham Week newspaper, is filling for our weekly news correspondent, Nadia Karitnikova. So she's here today, Chloe, to discuss this week's news and events. And also the Grammy nominees, Eddie Ray Johnson and Mwalim Dufunki, professor of the Groovelatus. They will be in the studio and they will discuss with us about their nomination during the coffee segment. But first, I would like to take this moment to thank Not Your Average Antiques, an antique shop down Cranberry Highway in East Wareham, for donating the props that you see in the morning show. So stay with us because the news and the weather report are next. Partly cloudy this morning. I think the sun is not going to come out at all. That's according to the weather. A few showers developing during the afternoon, high at 72 degrees and low at 54. Saturday, tomorrow, partly cloudy skies in the morning, which will give way to cloudy skies during the afternoon, high at 68 and low at 54. Sunday, cloudy skies as well, followed by partial clearing, high at 68 degrees, and scattered thunderstorms at night with low at 56 degrees. So I'm not sure how to sum up this weekend. It's going to be nice, warm, but no sunshine. Anyhow, and now we're going to move on to the news. There were a few news stories over the week, and here are the news headlines. So today at 3 p.m., and this is an announcement, not news, there will be a community outreach meeting for multi-use recreational cannabis business in room 320 of the Multi-Service Center at 48 Marion Road. The proposed facility, which will be located at 2400 and 2402 Cranberry Highway, would feature a recreational cannabis micro-business, a private members-only social consumption lounge, and a craft cultivation site. The meeting will include an opportunity to ask questions. So that is today at 3 p.m. at the Multi-Service Center building. And the plans for Onset's new fire station were presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals at its May 22nd meeting. The budget for the new station was reduced from $13.9 million to $8 million. The new station, which will be located at 8 Sandpond Road near the Salvation Army, will be a one-story building instead of two, as they originally proposed. The project needs to win an approval of the Zoning Boards of Appeals. And also, the Becca Polito administration has awarded Green Communities designation grants totaling over $1 million, including $204,952 to Wareham. The awards will fund energy efficiency projects and were presented by the Department of Energy Resources Commissioner Judith Judson during ceremonies in Cape Cod and the South Coast. Under the Green Communities Act, cities and towns must meet 5 criteria to be designated as a green community and receive funding, including reducing municipal energy consumption by 20% over 5 years. As you all know, Wareham is part of the green community. And a retirement reception honoring all former Wareham High School staff is being held at Wareham High School cafeteria on Friday, June 7th at 1:15 p.m. Please reply to Jennifer Lefrancois, I believe, by June 3rd at Wareham High School. And now we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more. As I told you, our weekly news correspondent from Wareham Week is in the building. My Favorite Russian by Chloe Shufford, who is the editor at Wareham Weekly newspaper, is here to fill for Nadia Karitnakova to digest this week's news and events. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. So tell us a bit about you. We do not know you. I do not know you.
Oh, well, I'm still pretty new to town. I just started working at Wareham Week in March.
Okay. And where are you coming from?
I was over at the Dartmouth paper, so a few
Okay.
towns over, but I'm excited to be here.
Same company.
Yes.
So what has changed? How is Dartmouth compared to Wareham?
Well, Wareham it's a little more chaotic, to be honest with you, but it's pretty fun. It's a wacky town, and I really like it. Yeah, I'm excited to sort of learn the ropes.
All right, very good. And you guys right now, how many reporters are there?
There's just me and Nadia.
And Nadia did say that you need another reporter so badly.
That would
Does
be
it
really
feel like
nice.
it? That would be really nice.
Yeah.
Is Anne looking at
I do not believe so.
applications?
No, not at this point.
Oh my goodness. So you two are running around like crazy.
Yes, usually, yeah.
Okay. So thank you for being here this morning. I know that Nadia is not in town, so you had to fill for Nadia. So you have a few stories that you'd like to talk about. We're going to start with the cemetery story.
Yes.
So to my understanding, what is happening at the cemeteries isn't illegal. This is a law passed last year, and in order to amend the law, people have to go to town meeting. So tell me, it looks like it's such an emotive law. Did this take people by surprise? Why such a reaction?
Yeah, so there were some new rules passed about what is allowed at the town cemeteries, which is mainly Agawam and Center Cemetery. There's another one at Onset, but it's mostly historic graves at this point. And so the law was passed at spring town meeting of last year, and it would require people to have, much fewer decorations around grave sites. So a lot of the graves there right now have, a border around the stone, or they have flowers planted and things like that. And this law would require that to be greatly reduced, which people were really surprised by, especially because a lot of these graves have looked the same for decades at this point.
Okay, they've looked the same for decades at this point, but once again, this is a passed law. So how do we explain the repudiation from the public?
Well, I think that I talked to Jack Silva, who's one of the cemetery commissioners, and he was saying that their goal isn't to punish people, but to make the cemeteries look, presentable and sort of more formal. But a lot of people were upset by that and said, who are you to tell us how to grieve? That's something that a lot of people were saying.
Which is interesting. And reading from your article, when you buy a grave site, you don't necessarily own it.
Right.
What you buy are the rights, right, to put your loved one there.
Right. I think that's something that Mr. Silva said is a common misunderstanding and something that I didn't know. So you have the right to bury someone there, but you don't have the right to use it as you please necessarily.
Okay. How did you come about to this article?
Actually, I heard about it on Facebook. A number of people actually were talking about the cleanup, and it really is very upsetting for a lot of people, I think.
Okay. So then your article, and I must say, when reading the article, I didn't hear the other side. I didn't hear the people who said, yes, the grave site looks fantastic. This is what we should do. I didn't get that from the article. I got the grieving parents, the mothers. And they had every single right to grieve. But once again, I'm buffed by the site that this is a law. And so why such a reaction?
Right. Well, I think that part of it was, I did a call out on Facebook for people who wanted to talk to me about it. And I only heard from people who were upset. I did talk to the cemetery commissioner and also to Derek Sullivan, who said he's received some compliments, or the town has received some compliments. And I think that maybe part of it is that people don't want to sort of go against the tide and say that they really like it. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just that unpopular. But if people do want to change it, they could put a petition forward, a citizen's petition for the next town meeting to change those rules.
Okay, there's some who do not even have grave stones, and they
That's
would
correct.
just create a little memorial.
Right.
Okay, and so what's your understanding? Why are they reinforcing this law now? What has happened?
I'm not totally sure exactly what triggered it. So I think it was that, this law was passed last year. I think there had perhaps been some complaints, and they decided that this was the time, they're going to do a
Complaints that
big,
there's a lot of...
right, a lot of
Okay.
stuff around that. So they were going to do a big spring cleanup. And yeah, one of the issues that was income-based, I think, is that there's some people who can't afford an upright headstone and only have, a flat marker, and they would not be allowed to leave anything at the gravesite. And there are also some people who haven't been able to afford any kind of stone marker at all. And so they just had, they give you a little plastic thing at a wake, and they just had that, and that has now been taken away. So those graves are completely unmarked at this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get that, as you said, it's income-based, so people feel discriminated or
think so.
restricted
Right.
because of how much they have in their pockets.
Right, because an upright headstone is really expensive, and that's not something that everyone can afford, especially if the death is unexpected.
Okay, so mothers, grieving parents complained. Did they offer any compromise? Did they say, if they were to do this instead of doing the full out law, that I would abide by it? Was there any compromise, or they were just entitled that I want this the way it is?
I think some people are saying, I understand that they want it to look nice. I understand, if I need to make the bordered area smaller. Some people are saying that, but part of what people were upset about is that they felt like, so the rationale presented by the Cemetery Commission is that it should look nicer, and also it's hard to maintain and mow around a lot of the, sort of arrangements around the grave sites. And they were saying, people were saying that they didn't feel like the cemetery was that well maintained to begin with, so why are they bothering, is what I was hearing from some people.
Oh, okay, so they're saying it wasn't well maintained, so why are they bothering now?
Right.
Okay, so but did they give you figures to support the argument that it is hard to maintain a cemetery surrounding everybody's configuration to how they want to grieve or represent their past loved one?
Not figures per se, but I think that, they said it's harder to mow if you're having to mow around a lot of different gardens and stuff, right? As I guess if you don't have, if there aren't the borders, maybe you can just mow in a straight line across big sections of the cemetery, and that's easier to do.
So your article came out. I reached out to the cemetery commissioner, who directed me to talk to our town administrator, Derek Selvin. He wasn't so happy. He pretty much rebuked everything. He felt the article was one-sided. So did they call you back? Did they say, okay, from the reaction you have received, we are going to do this now?
Well, I heard, the only thing I really heard was from Derek Sullivan. I had a line in the story about how officials say that most of the feedback has been positive, and he wanted to, that's something I heard from Jack Silva, and Derek Sullivan said he had received some compliments, but he wanted to clarify that he didn't say that most of the feedback was positive. But that's really the only feedback I've gotten from officials in town. I'm sorry to hear they thought it was a one-sided article.
Yeah, I cannot even do a story about that because they completely told me, yeah, he no longer wants to entertain such topic with the press.
Interesting.
Interesting it is. Okay, so we're going to move on, all right? We're going to move on to the Toby homestead, all right? So the demolition is coming sooner than we expected, and they have showcased some plans, right? You were in their meeting. When was this?
That was on Thursday.
Thursday, you attended the meeting. So tell me about the plans that you saw. I was a bit confused to what is actually going to happen when they take the homestead out.
Right. So to be honest with you, I was a little bit confused by some of the renderings as well. But my best understanding is they're going to demolish the homestead and build a big extension of the emergency room, because right now the current emergency room was designed to serve 15,000 patients a year. Right now they're seeing 30,000 patients a year, so double capacity. And so they want to expand to create a space that could serve, I believe, 40,000 people a year. So they're going to tear down the homestead and build out, it's a one-story extension of the hospital that the hospital representative said is designed to sort of pay homage to the Toby homestead. So there are elements like, white, sort of clapboard looking siding and some columns. And I believe it's going to, so the new entrance to the emergency room will be where the current curb cut to get into the homestead is. And something interesting that I was surprised by is that they're planning on having all the ambulances and all the emergency room traffic drive down Main Street instead of High Street.
Okay. And
So-
that's something new?
That's new, yeah.
Okay.
So before everyone went down High Street, and now all the ambulances would go down Main Street, which that was something that a lot of the public was sort of concerned about traffic-wise.
Okay. And that point was dismissed regarding traffic. People have always cried wolf regarding traffic about everything. You want to put
Yeah.
an ice cream store, somebody will say traffic. That has
Right.
always been the argument. So apart from demolishing, paying homage, right? They want to do something to the Bessie Park. They want to do something
right.
there. Tell us about what they're proposing.
Yeah, they're planning on building a gazebo there as sort of a sort of space, and I think kind of a gift to the community is sort of how they're thinking about it. And they designed it to also to sort of look a little bit like the homestead. So there's going to be sort of arch-shaped windows that are like the one over the front door to the homestead and things like that, which is nice. And the idea would be it would be a place for people to hang out and spend time in Bessie Park. And they have to get approval from, I believe, the Bessie family descendants, because in the initial deed or when Mary Bessie donated the park to the town, she said that she didn't want there to be any structures built. So that's something they're working on, but that is a plan that they have.
But I don't see Bessie Park as a place that attracts people to look at the water and hang out. It's one of those places you go and take a nap, eat lunch, or fish, and other crazy stuff that happened there.
Yeah, I think that the idea is that it would be a way to sort of maybe make Bessie Park a more attractive destination for people in town if you have a nice place to sit.
Oh, okay. So did they say what we are looking for time frame?
Not yet, and I think that it's not clear that they have the full approval yet. I asked a Toby Hospital representative, will this be going before the planning board or the zoning board of approvals? And he said he had to talk to their lawyer to figure that out. So I don't think they have a concrete date yet that I know of.
Okay, and these plans certain, or they are looking to keep on changing them? Are they still on the works?
I think that they could still be changed because the approval they received was from the Historic District Commission, which is mostly about the aesthetics of the building. Will it fit in with the area? But they may have to go before, the Zoning Board of Appeal or the Planning Board, which could raise other issues with it that aren't related to just aesthetics.
Okay. So then the article, which I found was funny, that you said most of the people who were at the meeting were people from Toby Hospital.
Right.
Right? So the voting or the discussion was almost leaning towards one side.
I would say more the discussion than, because the vote was just the members of the commission, but there were, I think that most of the people who asked questions were people from the town, but one of the people on the commission asked all the people who were employees of the hospital to raise their hand, and that was, I think, about half, if not more than half of the room, which was sort of interesting.
All right. So what are some of the concerns people voiced, apart from the traffic having emergency vehicles go through Main Street?
Well, some people had some, aesthetic concerns. There was one lady who said she didn't really like the way the light posts looked. And
unbelievable. This is an emergency room. We have a high population of seniors. People worry about how would light lamp look or something like that.
Yeah, I think she was thinking, in this historic district, we wanted to sort of look nice and blend in with what's around it. But yeah, I think that most of the questions were trying to figure out, okay, how is the traffic going to work? How does this link up to Main Street? Because they didn't have a rendering showing the entrance, so that was a little hard to picture. But there weren't too many big complaints, I would say, from the people who were there.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to what happened. Oh, the Oyster Fest.
Right.
Okay. This was your first, right?
Yes.
Tell
very
me
exciting.
What you thought.
Oh, I thought it was great. It was a beautiful day. I guess it was the best day they've had so far for the festival, which was really nice. And they had a really, really high turnout, which was great. I was there at about 2:30, and it was packed, and I guess it was even busier right when the festival opened.
Do we have numbers?
Not yet, because they do a sort of a survey of all the vendors and sort of average out that to figure out how many people were there, since you don't have to pay to get in, so it's hard to keep track. But there were so many people there that some of the vendors were running out of oysters early. So
No, and they've always had it under the Memorial Day weekend, right?
Right.
It just this time, and I'm telling you, for the past few years, the weather has been horrible.
Yeah.
Yes, only this time things fell according to plan.
Right.
Well, thank you very much. What is going on this weekend?
This weekend there is, goodness, I don't know.
Okay. You need another
sorry.
reporter.
We do. I need another reporter, or I need to look at the calendar before I come on the show.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
the time
you.
that you spared to digest the week's news, and I hope you will come back.
Thank you, Queen. Yes, me too.
So that was not Nadia Karinakova. That was right, our weekly news correspondent. So that was Chloe to digest this week's news and the events. And now we're going to move on. We're going to go to Worcester to visit New England Wildlife Center. Take a look. An episode of Dr. Dolittle in real life. This is wildlife care at New England Wildlife Center.
These are the most disenfranchised animals that veterinarians care for.
Established in 1983, its headquarters in South Weymouth to its recently acquired branch on Cape Cod, this nonprofit sees a wide range of patients.
There's 225 different species of wild animals that come to us, and there's about 150, 175 different species of non-traditional pets.
Even without insurance, these patients receive a comprehensive health care.
Each animal gets its own individual chart, medical chart, and they get tracked day by day.
Everything from x-rays, blood work, to a special diet. I bet they are so grateful. How grateful are they?
They're not very grateful at all. Our patients are not grateful. I mean, our patients want to be free. You know, it's like girls want to have fun. Wild animals want to be free.
Like this bunny who had a tibia fracture. Today, he gets released.
So the goal is for a wild animal to be released back into the wild, it needs to be self-sustainable. So that means it has to be able to find its own food, has to be able to escape danger, has to be able to find protection.
The majority of patients here are victims of human actions.
I would say 25% of our animals come in because they have lead poisoning. Probably 20% come in because they have rodenticide poisoning. So these are the after effects of the impact that people have had on these animals.
With that said, the mission here is simple.
Our goal and our mission is to be a safety net and to be a safe haven for sick, injured, and orphan wildlife in Massachusetts. We don't feel that we are good enough biologists to decide what animals are important and which animals are not important.
In other words, this is a good thing we're doing. We're trying to make these animals have a second chance. Any animal that doesn't come here is probably going to die in the wild. You know, it's either going to be eaten by somebody else, which is part of the natural cycles, or it's going to just lie and suffer until it passes away.
Like this harrowing story of a mama possum brought in with a split jaw from being hit by a car.
Police brought him in and he had a fractured jaw. Essentially right down the center of his jaw had split and separated.
Only to find out that he was a she, carrying 9 extra patients inside her pouch.
And they were so small at that point. Dr. Patel devised a way that she could actually wire the jaw shut. Now, this is not something we've ever done before with a possum, meaning that we had to really closely monitor to make sure the babies were still feeding, everyone was healthy, it wasn't overtaxing on mom. But she did really, really well. And actually the feeding tube came out a few days ago, earlier than we expected. Mom is eating her on her own with this piece of wire in there, self-feeding no problem, and all 9 babies have managed to stay attached and are growing every single day.
And the miracles do not stop there. Take the story of this Canadian goose.
This goose, was not having a successful existence with humans. You know, living around humans was not going well for this goose.
Animal control had been tracking this elusive goose, a victim of a crime.
It was found that he also had gunshot inside of him. He also was suffering from lead poisoning. and he actually died on the table, then was resuscitated, and then had a second operation, died on the table, was resuscitated. This was an amazing goose. And he was released back to the wild about 2 months later, which was incredible.
Incredible, because survival odds are poor.
Of the wild animals that we treat, 50% at best, 50% of them will make it back to the wild. 50% are going to die in the process. They're either going to be deliberately euthanized because they're carrying a disease that we don't want to spread to people or to other animals, or they have an injury that we just can't treat.
There are also budget and infrastructure factors that threaten wildlife mortality.
We have denied treatment of wild animals for both a lack of funding, but also a lack of stamina, also a lack of space. Like right this very minute in this building, we have 55 raccoons. 55 baby raccoons that mothers have been killed on the road, have befallen some sort of injury. Now realize each raccoon family has five babies in it, so we're talking about 11 families here but we can't care. These animals need to be fed every 20 minutes. All that screaming you hear in the background is raccoons begging for food, and there are people in there feeding constantly, almost from sunup to sundown.
Take funding, for example. The hospital is by law required to provide the same level of care as of commercial veterinarian hospital without the state or federal aid.
If it was in a commercial setting, the average cost for every one of those animals would be about $100 per day. $100 a day, and multiply it times the 5,000 animals that we see that come into our centers. And then we multiply that times the average number of animals, the average number of days that these animals stay in the hospital. You're going to come up with a figure that is somewhere between $4 million and $7 million. Now that does not even come close to what our budgets are.
We are bound and constricted by how much funding we can raise. And I would say, you know, it caps how many animals we can treat. It also has this, there's always an edge to, okay, will we make it till next year? Will we make it to the following year? You know, because nothing is guaranteed.
What's your understanding to why wildlife care isn't receiving funding?
Everybody thinks it should be funded, but nobody wants to fund it.
Caring for wildlife seems a little bit off-center because we're caring for something that doesn't directly impact us. But the problem is it does impact us. The health of the environment and the health of the habitats we're living on is going to reflect in the health of who we are as people.
The uncertainty looming around funding comes as the need soars.
The need for veterinary care and rehabilitative care for wildlife continues to grow. Every year there's more and more because encroachment on the land is more and more, and they were here first. So the more we cut down trees, the more we disturb habitat, the more we introduce chemicals, the more that wildlife need from us.
The hospital tries to supplement its funding through their Odd Pet Vet program.
They bring in birds and reptiles, amphibians, and those animals get cared for here for a price, like a commercial practice, and 100% of those dollars go to the nonprofit, and that gives us about 20% of our funding.
In addition, the public can also drop off their odd pets at the hospital while they are away. There are a lot of areas of need, but what is the concentration right now?
That's a great question, because it's everything. I would say, though, that right now, the biggest thing we need in fundraising is individual donors.
As for now, the hospital's most valuable resource is its volunteers.
He still thinks he's eating.
Oh!
Oh my goodness.
Once more. Through its community approach efforts, the hospital works to bridge the gap between the community and nature.
We can't read about it in a book. We can't stay in and watch it on television. We have to be able to have safe contact, not not unsafe contact.
Safe contact with the wild is introduced here through the wide range of classes, internships, and community service opportunities that are offered to all.
Howard told me to save the extra food out until the photography people get here.
Oh,
Okay.
gotcha. All right, now what kind of turtles are these guys?
So those are also Diamondback terrapins.
All right, that's the same thing as what we saw in the other room.
New England Wildlife Center's doors are open here in South Weymouth or on Cape Cod. Come and get acquainted with your wild neighbors.
And learn about the animals from their backyard, learn about the wildlife that lives in our area. And they get to work right alongside of us with professional veterinarians and veterinary technicians and rehabilitators so that they are able to bring those animals back to the wild.
You can visit the New England Wildlife Center in South Weymouth or at their Cape Cod branch in Hyannis to learn more or to volunteer. For now, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more. Hello and thank you for being with us for this Good Morning Wareham show. We are broadcasting live right from our WCTV studio in Wareham. And now for a moment in history, let's take a look at where we were today in history. And today in history, back in 2005, Mark Felt was revealed to be the man who spilled the tea of the Watergate scandal. It took over 30 years for him to be revealed. It turns out that Felt was upset that Nixon did not appoint him to be the next director of FBI after Edgar Hoover died. And today, back in 1889, the Jonestown flood happened in a river valley in central Pennsylvania caused by heavy rain and a neglected dam, leading to a disaster in which 2,209 people died. And a prosperous city, Jonestown, is nearly wiped off from the face of the earth. And we're going to go we have a couple of birthdays today. In 1819, the American poet Walt Whitman was born on Long Island. He self-published a book of poems called Leaves of Grass in 1855. He would go on to be remembered as a great American writer. And in 1930, another classic American was born, Clint Eastwood, born in San Francisco. He has won Lifetime Achievement Award from Directors Guild of America and has spent time in politics being the mayor of Carmel in California from 1986 to 1988. He continues to make movies to this day. And that's all for today in history. To learn more cool historical facts, please go online under history.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The coffee segment is next. But first, let's take a look at our events calendar. This is Good Morning Wareham. We're broadcasting live from our WCTV studio at 505 Main Street in Wareham. And this is the coffee segment. With me is Mwalim Dufunki Professor. And we have Eddie Ray Johnson.
How you doing?
Who are from Groovelados.
Groovelados.
Okay, a multi-Grammy nominated powerhouse soul funk blues band.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
That's a mouthful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you say that? Just say that.
Soul funk blues.
Soul funk.
A multi-Grammy. Check this out. Lips to teeth, the tip of the tongue. Lips to teeth, the tip of the tongue. Okay. A powerhouse, multi-Grammy nominated soul funk blues band.
Okay. All right. Well, because it's you, so you're someone introducing yourself. All right. That was not a challenge.
I could be completely inarticulate and be like, yeah, we're a multi-couple soul funk blues band.
Okay.
And that could be my normal introduction. I'm just inarticulate, so therefore, you know.
So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So you got nominated,
Yes.
and this is not the first time.
No.
No.
Okay, so tell me, how does it feel? This time when you got nominated, did you feel like this is it?
Yeah, it was more like, oh, Eddie Ray, here we go again.
Yeah.
No way.
Yes.
Why? Why that?
Well, it's funny because I mean, honestly, it's an honor. We're being funny, but
Okay.
Yes,
it's an
it is an
honor.
honor.
But with the Recording Academy, what we discovered was being nominated is actually in some ways almost better than winning, because the nomination is based on the members of the Academy, who are all record producers, record labels, and other artists, listened to your music. The panel listened to your music and felt that it was of quality to be considered
Yes.
for a Grammy. The next step is all largely based on marketing and influence, and I noticed the Recording Academy because I subsequently joined the Recording Academy. It was a funny thing. I discovered I could have joined the Recording Academy 20 years ago, and I was like an adamant underground artist. I was like, you know, hell with the Grammys, to hell with it, you know. And so,
And now you're like, Grammy!
now it's like, hey, cool.
Yeah.
I can put that on my resume. I'm Grammy nominated. You know. You know, it's like somebody wants to argue with me. I got a Grammy nomination. What you got?
So
bro?
how often do you how often do you bring that up in a conversation?
Oh. Well, we stopped.
Oh look, he's counting. He's lost count. How many times?
We stopped wearing the T-shirt.
And the badge.
And that used to be our greeting card. Like before we'd even say hello to you, we're Grammy nominated. Be impressed. We're about to speak to you. We have Grammy nominated. No.
Yeah.
No, he's
Seriously.
joking. He's
Seriously,
joking.
but no. We were.
Now.
I think what was interesting was how we actually came to the Academy's attention.
Okay. Tell me, how did you come to Academy attention? Because you say you're
I was
underground.
about to say that, and you interrupted me. So, you know.
You asked for that one.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No. Well, what we were doing, we were primarily like a bar band. We started to ease our way into the festival circuit. And what we discovered about the bar situation in this area was we were the wrong hue for a lot of bars.
How come?
They like funk, they just don't like funk played by folks who look like us, is the interesting thing we began to discover.
South Coast?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, not so much South Coast. I would say more Barnstable to some extent.
Yeah.
To a lesser extent, Plymouth County. But so
You're kidding. Those communities are diverse communities.
Yeah, but not the folks who own the bars. The bar managers aren't.
Yeah, right.
The bar owners aren't.
Okay, so
You know, some of the Cape Cod based festivals are not. So, you know, yes, you have a population, but if the population is not controlling the commerce, they're the population, they're the consumer population. So, what we began to find was we were doing a lot more shows off Cape. We were getting bookings in New York City, we were getting bookings in Virginia, Washington, D.C., Connecticut, other parts of Massachusetts. We were playing Boston, we were playing Worcester, we were
right.
playing, yeah, we were playing pretty much a lot of places outside of the area. And what we wanted to do specifically is, just like we said, the diverse community. It was a matter of how do we get our music to the diverse community if it's not going to be within these venues. And it's sort of like, the other thing is, it's a circuit, and we didn't really want to be in that circuit per se. Because unfortunately, the bar band circuit never evolves out of the bar band, out of being a bar band.
Right.
And it's basically, the argument is, why am I going to pay $20 to come see you at this place or that place if I can go see you at the Red Parrot for the price of a beer? You know, so we realized that's a dead end circuit.
Right.
But what we wanted to do to sort of stay in the public eye, and the total idea came actually just hanging out in Provincetown off season and seeing street performers and realizing, you know, that's not really a bad idea. Because you're playing in a bar and they're giving you a set fee, which is peanuts. And so it's like we could probably do just as well playing on a street corner with a bucket in front of us. So then our plan became, instead of going to bars, which is usually what you do when you're a band, you go to the bar, you try to see the manager, you give them your card, give them a link to your music, or give them a CD, or what have you. What we instead did was went to the various town departments, the libraries, different businesses in different towns, and said, we want to come play in front of your store, or we want to come play in front of the library, or we want to come play in the town square. And what's the permit process, or how can we get permission to do that? So what we created was a tour called the Funk Hits, where we basically played street corners throughout, initially throughout the South Coast. And then when we did the Funk Hits, what we discovered was they love us in Provincetown. I mean, we did well in all of the other towns too, but we found one night in Provincetown, without exaggeration, we pulled in close to $1,000. That was playing in our
With just a bucket.
Yeah, with a bucket. Another night, now there was a bar that we used to play in Provincetown that I'm not going to name because they don't deserve the publicity, but we had a falling out with the owner of the bar, and it doubled in a manner of speaking because how petty she was. She owned a couple of buildings, and one of the buildings was a building that we had made a deal with where they were letting us use electricity, and she told them they under no circumstances can let us use the electricity. So we went and bought a generator and came back, and we set up right across from her business one evening. And of course, we had permits. We were on public property. So we're there playing our funk right up into her shop, and she's standing on the front steps glaring at us, and people are throwing money in the bucket as they're coming by, and people are there gathering around us and dancing, and she's just standing there steadily glaring at us. And after, I guess, about 2 hours of this, we're packing up, and the band that she had for that night is loading in. And meanwhile, we had to dump out the bucket about 2 or 3 times, redump it because it was overflowing. We pretty much made, I would say, almost 3 times as much as we ever made playing in her bar in half the time. And we were breaking down when her band was just setting up. So we were like, you know, we're older guys. We're like, wow, done at 8:30. I like it. I can dig this.
So then you discovered that's where your music will be. No longer chasing bars, no longer chasing people.
It's festivals, and,
Yes.
and what we do funk hits, where it's like a small stripped down version of the band. It might just be him on drums and me on keys, or my son plays percussion for us, so it might be percussion, drums, and keys. Sometimes we've done a funk hit as a full band. Sometimes we've even had other musicians sit in. So one time we had a horn section. Was a bunch of the kids from Mashpee High, who one of our mentoring sites is Mashpee High's music program. So some of them have sat in with us at different funk hits. But yeah, it's basically festivals and special shows, special appearances, and an occasional funk hit. But what we found was we started playing more regularly in Provincetown out on the street, and that was what brought us to international attention. And that was what, so it's a very long story, sorry.
No, it's good. It's very interesting, and I'm
but-
surprised that you're playing funky music and people are not denying your music, but they just did not want you, in particular, to represent that music. So tell me, why funky music?
Why not?
Well, what is funky music?
Funky music, how do we describe it? Let's see. Okay, so you have the Big Bang Theory,
Okay.
where everything happened with an explosion.
My God, okay.
Well, that explosion was a thump. Now we understand in terms of the thump, even if you go to Buddhists, they talk about the pulse of the universe. Well, you think about the pulse of the universe and you think about your heartbeat. And your heartbeat is a,
Okay.
well, that's the funk.
And you said you're playing with your souls instead of your hands.
Yeah, there's a metaphysics to music. If musicians might not speak the same verbal language, we might not even play the same instruments, but we'll understand each other when we sit down and play. What was that piece that you were playing for me the other day? Marcus Miller, jazz bassist, was playing with a sitar. Now, a bass is based on the bassi, the European bass, the double bass, which comes out of Italy, which actually originally, the double bass originally comes out of Morocco. So you have a Moroccan instrument, which is more, let's say, on the western side of things, and then you have a piece that is coming out of the east. Two completely different constructs, two completely different scales, two completely different concepts of scales, but they're able to make music together. So music is a universal language. So when you play with your soul, it's because you've reached beyond just the basic theory of the music, of the confines of music. You know, the first thing we have to realize is that we live in a country, the United States, which is all about categories and subcategories, because the United States wants to define everything. We were the first, the United States was the first country to have a legal definition of race based on ethnicity, because race originally meant place of origin. You had the Italian race, you had the French race, you had, because that was what race originally meant. But then there was this embracing of a racist and white supremacist point of view. And so therefore when you do that, you have to now categorize. So then this makes you an Indian, this makes you an African, this makes you an Asian, this makes you European. So in terms of categories, you have music, you have popular music, but then what happens is black people start to make music that becomes popular, so you have to create now a category. So therefore, when it's the black person playing it, it's rhythm and blues. When the white person's playing it, it's rock and roll. And it's the same damn song. If you think about it.
Yes.
So when you consider that the soul recordings that were coming out in the 1960s, these are soul records, but half of the musicians are country players, but they can play soul. You listen to Al Green singing "Let's Stay Together," and you hear this nice, rich, tight harmony behind him, and you think these are three black women from the church, and these are three blonde-headed country singers singing the background, because there's a universal element to the music. And when we create these categories, we create these sort of like false lines. And so people think that, and of course it works out, because people are like, oh, wow, so you guys can play this and you can play that and you can play this, and we're like, yeah, sure, because to us it's music. It's music. And there are certain cultural elements that are different. If you have music that is coming over, let's say, if you have music that is coming more so of the African diaspora, we talk about beat emphasis. Of the African diaspora, the beats that are, if we're looking at, like, say, a 4 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, beat this emphasizes 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. So that becomes one of the universal elements. This is why you can be a blues player and can go to Ghana and play your blues guitar over the drums, because we have that same element to our language. But then if you look at music that is more so derivative of Europe, the interesting thing is the beat that's emphasized is the 1 and the 3. So they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And what becomes really funny though, of course, is when you're playing music of the African diaspora for European people, and they're, you know, folk music, for example, is if you think about, you know, like Puff the Magic Drag, that's 1, you know, Michael row the boat ashore, you know, you think of your European-based folk music, European-American folk music, it's 1 and 3. And people are oriented that way, and then all of a sudden they're now exposed to the music that's the but they're counting. The count is, you know, the count feels off.
Yeah.
But and sometimes that count is what can shift the style of music, because for example, you have a song that was a hit. It was considered a hillbilly hit, called "Careless Love." And when you listen to "Careless Love," it's that one. Careless love, oh careless love, the 1 and the 3, and it became this big hit, what they call hillbilly hit. W.C. Handy wrote "Careless Love." W.C. Handy is the father of the blues. So he has his big song is St. Louis Blues, which is the 2 and the 4 count. You know, and when you hear him play "Careless Love," but now you give it the country feel. That becomes the subtle difference. But what happens is, you now in the 40s and 50s, because of jazz, because of big band, you now start to have an influence where the 1 and the 3 begin to disappear, and now the Europeans are playing the 2 and the 4.
So on
So
that,
they have to change the name.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. So on that note, who comes to your concerts? I mean, when I heard your music, the funk music, I pictured older people, older generation. So with that said, does it mean that funk music, is it a dying breed or a passing breed?
No.
You listen to trap, hip hop.
Yeah.
That's funk.
That's funk.
That's funk. It's just electronic, but it's funk.
Right.
It's following, remember, the same musical qualities that I was describing, the 2 and the 4, the emphasized 1. That's what you're hearing. You're hearing funk. Excuse me, you're hearing funk.
Right.
It's interesting because the instrumentation might change.
Right.
And of course, there's also the generational relation. We're older guys, so older people are going to like our music.
Well, that's not necessarily true. We
This is true.
still have the young kids that come,
Yeah.
the skateboarders, the young musicians who show up in front,
Yeah,
and they
this is
come.
quite true.
They come and they sit right up front.
Yeah.
And they sit and they watch.
In fact, it's really interesting with us because the point you're making is actually quite right. We have this audience, I would say, of like 14 to maybe 22, 23, 24-year-olds who are, like he said, sitting there on the front row. And they're like, oh man, this is awesome. And they're filming us with their phones and whatnot. And then there's this generation gap that suddenly kicks back into people who are like in their late 40s and older. And it's to an extent because they're listening to us and they're hearing the records that they have in their collection or something like it. So that's what they're gravitating to. The younger people, because of the fact that I'm listening to trap and realizing, wait a minute, he's playing that, you know, he's on the hi-hat. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, that's the same stuff I'm listening to on the radio. It's just on a drum, but you know.
Well, we have, how many minutes do we have? 2 minutes. Geez, where could we find you now? Now that you are...
Well, okay.
Okay.
This year, instead of the tour, what we did was, we did we're doing a show.
Okay.
One of the, just to go very quickly, one of the venues in Provincetown gave us the opportunity. They said, you want to take every single Saturday? We said, sure. My other background, I'm a playwright.
Okay.
So I decided, let's write a musical. We took our music, and I wrote a play around the music. And looking at the older generation, we set the play in 1968.
Yeah.
So what we do is we recreate an underground nightclub in New York City in 1968 using our style of music, and we have actors who interact with the audience, so they're actually part of the audience, doing their pieces out in the audience while the band is just sort of playing in the background.
Okay.
And it's experiential theater. It's the type of theater.
Saturday, every
Every
Saturday
Saturday.
night.
Every Saturday night
7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
in the basement of the Governor Bradford Hotel.
Yes.
I mean,
Well,
Governor Bradford
The
restaurant.
show starts at 7:30.
7:30. Okay, doors are
open.
Right.
All right.
And the website for it is tinyurl.com/The Soul Session, because the name of the play is The Soul Session. And tinyurl.com/The Soul Session.
Right.
Okay.
We're going to party like it's 1968.
1968. Okay. Thank you so much to both of you. I'm sorry that I'm running out of time,
Oh, no
but at
worries.
least I learned about funk music, and now I'm going to pay attention to the beat and see what I'm actually listening to.
And next time you're going to sing for us, right?
Something like that.
I
So.
think the song she said was "Oh Jesus." or
Oh
something
my
like that,
God.
right?
Yes, yes,
Oh, it's going to be "Oh my
my-
God" now. All right, right. Well, thank you. All right.
My guests, I have Mwalim Dufunky Professor, and also I have Eddie Ray Johnson, who are the multi-Grammy nominated band,
The Groovalados.
Groovalados. Thank you so much.
GROOVALOTTOS.
And I hope you come back
Soul Funk
again.
Blues. Oh,
I have a lot to learn.
is that an invitation?
Yes.
Oh, she's bringing us back.
If you missed us this morning, we'll re-air this episode at 6 p.m. this afternoon. But with that, I would like to thank you for joining me this morning, and we'll be back on Monday with more. Have a pleasant day, Wareham. Bye.